So welcome to our positivity bias class. We're on chapter 23, and it is very relevant to my life right now. So right now I'm in this stage where we have been in transition from one city to another for about 6 months now. And it's been very challenging. And at the synagogue that we're transitioning to, this Shabbos, they asked me to speak at the Fabringen, at the casual gathering, to share some words of Torah and personal insights. And that which I was talking about was in Shara B'tochen, in the book of trust in God, right? What's the measure of your trust? The measure of your trust is how calm you remain in the midst of the chaos, right? And I was talking about how difficult it's been. One of my granddaughters had commented, "Oh, so you're homeless." I said, "Well, not in the traditional sense, but yes." And the topic of the Fabringen was, how do you remain calm when everything in your life is up in the air? And what I was talking about was, and I kind of shared the circumstances we're in, and somebody responded, "Oh, so we are, our job in the community right now is to help to figure this thing out for you." And I said, "No, you don't have to figure this out for me, because God already has that chosen. All those details God has already had chosen. He hasn't revealed it to us yet, but he knows exactly what he's doing." So for me, the challenge becomes, in this transitional time, what's the lesson I'm supposed to be learning? What am I supposed to be gleaning from what I would call a stressful environment? What am I supposed to be gaining from this? And once I gain and glean whatever it is I'm supposed to learn, then the challenge period is over, and God can reveal what the answer has been, and that he's known all along. But I had to, there's some things I have to learn in this transitional time. And part of that was that we came into this situation with a series of qualifications of what we wanted to do and how we were going to do it. And as all of you know, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. We are on the 6th or 7th reiteration of what we thought we ought to be doing. We gave up on all kinds of categories of things we thought were priorities, and we've given up on a bunch of those things. After class, we can have a l'chaim and talk about some of the details of those. But part of that is learning to let go of our trying to control things the way we think best, and being open to what God wants to see done and how God wants it to play out. And if we can be calm in the interim and seek to learn from the experience, because for sure God wants what's good for me, and for sure God only wants the best thing for me. So this must be the best way for me to integrate the knowledge that I'm supposed to be gaining from this experience. This must be the best way to integrate it. And as soon as I have figured all that out, test is over. We can go on with things.
Well, wait.
But
you're assuming you have to figure it out. You may not have to figure it out. You may have to just go along with the plan.
What plan?
Hashem. Hashem has a plan, and it's in progress.
yes.
And sometimes you try to figure things out, and you can rack yourself crazy. But sometimes you just have to accept things for what they are and go with it.
And that acceptance may very well be the lesson that you have to learn.
Yeah.
But that is a lesson to learn.
Full acceptance means you're gamzu.
Right. But at the same time, it is a lesson you have to accept and learn. Right. So there is something that has to be gleaned. That's the bottom line, right? So as we dive into this chapter is titled Optimizing Turbulence, Transition, and Transience. And that's it, you know. So whether that's on a personal note that I'm going through right now, or on a national level, which we're all going through right now, that transitional stuff, some of the lessons we have to learn are accepting and being calm throughout, and being able to trust that God has our best interests in mind, and it will be great. It will be what it needs to be. And it may not feel great in the interim period, but there is greatness in this, and that God's leading. So let's dive into the chapter itself. And what he opens up with is, again, this idea of, I've got plans. I've got ideas about how I think this ought to unfold. I've got criteria. I've got I've got it all planned, right? And I have this well thought out. I have advisors who've suggested, you know, we've got a plan, and none of that is actually working. So how do we move forward? So the first story he shares, a friend of ours, this was Mrs. Miriam Swerdlove, back in 1967, she was attending one of the first Chabad sponsors women conventions in Detroit, and there are about 20 women with her headed back to New York at the end of the conference, and they learned that their flight was canceled due to a snowstorm, literally canceled. And so, as the director of the group, she ran to a payphone back in '67. She called up Chabad headquarters in New York and spoke with the secretary to say that we got stuck because of the snowstorm. We got stuck in Detroit. So the secretary put them on hold and went to the Rebbe, and he came back and he said, so the secretary said to Mrs. Swerdlove, the Rebbe doesn't understand the idea of stuck. So she starts to explain what stuck means, and the secretary said, the Rebbe knows what stuck means, but he doesn't understand how that can be applicable. And so that's when Mrs. Swerdlove and the women started realizing, okay, Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, we're meant to be here right now. What should we be doing to add light to the world? And so immediately they started canvassing the Detroit airport, trying to find Jewish women to light Shabbos candles, men to maybe put on, well, they didn't have to fill in with them, it was a women's group. But what Torah things could they share? What conversations could they have that would make the world a better place? And so they talk back about, in reflection back to that event, there are today many women who are lighting Shabbos candles every week because of them being stuck in Detroit for those hours.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't stuck. They thought they were stuck, but no. Wherever you are, whenever you are, that's when and where you're supposed to be. It's a matter of what are you going to do with it while you're there. I think that's one of the main things about Hashgacha Pratis, is understanding that the when and where of us being someplace, that is directly controlled by God. We think we make decisions, we think we have ideas, but the reality is that when and where, that's controlled by God. What you do with that time and place, now that's on you. So God guides us to where the divine sparks that we're supposed to elevate, he guides us to that time and place for us to do something with it, right? I thought that when we moved to Tampa to help my mother-in-law, and then she passed away, I thought the obvious, clear next move would be to be Arizona, where my mother is, and she's aging, so we don't go through another scenario that we did for the last year, where my wife and I are separated because someone has to be there helping a senior parent. Well, that was my thought. We're in Baltimore,
About to buy a house.
So, coming to terms with God runs the world, stop fighting that reality, embracing that reality, and saying, okay, knowing that that is the bottom line, that's the reality. What am I going to do with this, right? I smile when I think about how many guys get to basic training and go, oh my God, I had no idea.
No, no. Piece of
Every
cake.
Marine who gets off the bus at basic training sees those yellow footsteps, and he all of a sudden realizes this isn't
Whoops.
Kansas anymore. And it's a rude awakening. But once you realize that this is what it is, right? God's in control of where and when. Now that you're here, what are you going to do with it? You can complain, or you can get on with life.
Jews don't
I saw-
complain. Don't complain. They kvetch.
So I was just saying, I saw a video stream today that was one guy with a poster, and he kept showing up in place after place after place after place. And what was the poster? Stop kvetching, go vote.
Truth.
Mhm.
You know, stop it.
And if you're in Chicago, you can do that multiple times.
Yeah. And I tell you, in my will, I specified that once I'm dead, I do not want to turn into a Democrat. Thank you. Vote off.
Okay, so another example that was given in the story here was the Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka Schneerson, Zichron Levracha, blessed memory. This was, I think, back, I'm going to say 60s, I believe, but she was, her driver was taking her to a local park in Long Island, where they would often go for some fresh air and a walk and health reasons, get out and get some fresh air, right? And they had a regular route that they took every week when they did this, and it was a regular routine. One time, the path the route was closed off, and they had to find another way. Of course, this is long before cell phones or GPS or anything else. So it was, if you had a map, great. Otherwise, figure it out, right? And they were taking an alternative route, and as they were doing that alternative route, as they were coming back into Brooklyn, she heard a woman crying. And she asked the driver to stop and back up and find out what's going on. And it turned out the sheriff was explaining, the marshal was explaining that the gal was being evicted from her home. So she asked the driver, go back and ask the marshal how much they're behind. Do they pay, and could he take a personal check?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, back then they could, right? So the Rebbetzin wrote a personal check for $6,700 and then gave it to the driver. He gave it to the marshal. He came back to the car, and she told him, drive away quickly before the woman understands what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she was able to do a great act of chesed, an unparalleled act of chesed, of kindness, in a very stressful environment, and do so in a way that maintains the integrity for the person who was receiving as much as possible. As they were leaving, the driver asked her, what just happened? What happened? And the Rebbetzin was able to explain that when she was young, her father, who was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, her father has explained to her about the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence. Every time, Frierdiker Rebbe told his daughter, every time something causes us to deviate from our normal routine, there is a divinely ordained reason for this deviation. Because God likes order. And when the normal order is deviated, that cannot be for naught. There's a reason for that. Something is up. something's unusual. There's a purpose that we have to go through that. Figure it out. Do something. Change the world in a way for good, right? And so that's when she said, you know, we've been doing this for all this time. We never had to change the route. The fact that we changed the route had to be for some reason. And why would I witness a situation of a poor woman's distress, losing her home and furnishings and everything, and being so distraught if I couldn't do something about it? I can, and I did. And that was the answer, right? So every phase of our journey, if we're looking at what's the divine providence, why would God have me go through this event and this deviation from norm, then there's something here that has to happen, something that I can do to make the world a better place. What is it? And our opportunity to step in, right? So the example that the Lubavitcher Rebbe uses regarding this is that when the Torah is talking about our journey from Egypt, we're doing a chazara, a review of the Torah, the last book, and Moses is now doing a review of here's what our journey has looked like when we left Egypt till we came to Mount Sinai and till we came to enter the land of Israel, right? So there were 42 encampments during the years that we traveled from Egypt to Israel. 42 encampments. But the question is, wait, hang on a second. What about the journey? If we're going to talk about the journey, why are we talking about the encampments? The encampments are the part where we stopped and we weren't moving forward in our mission. And the answer is no. Those stops are part of the mission. You're stopping there and then because there's something that has to be accomplished there and then. Those are part of the journey. All of the side tours and all of the derailments and all the frustrations are all part of the journey that we're going on. And there's, again, 42 masos, 42 journeys is the standard there. And in a sense, all of us are destined to go through 42 journeys, 42 unexpected sidetracks or challenges or crises or tragedies. There's a standard 42, not standard activity challenges, but there's a standard number of 42 that we're all expected to go through. I remember back in 1990, I was teaching at the Hebrew Academy in Long Beach, California. And due to whatever circumstances, the financial bottom fell out of the school. And a number of us were no longer employed. And all other curricular activities that had been part of the school programming, like I was doing youth outreach and teen programming, etc., all those things were canceled. And so my wife and I, we had to figure out, are we going to stay in Long Beach because we've got a wonderful community that we really feel a part of? Or do I stay in rabbinical work and find a new job teaching someplace else? And I spoke with a mentor. I spoke with an advisor, and his bottom line was that if God has given you a talent, a chush, something you're good at, that's a sign that that's part of your mission. That's what you have. That's what you're in the world to do. And so you're good at teaching. You have to teach. Going to work for Xerox is not going to cut it. You have to teach. So intellectually, I accepted that idea. But emotionally, I loved Southern California. I loved the community we were a part of. I loved the work I was doing. I didn't want to go. So Saturday night after Shabbos, I went for this long walk through the neighborhood. And I was thinking, my mind was processing the emotions of the loss and the transition and trying to find a new place to go to and things. And I was emotionally going through all those things. And at some point in my trance, I stopped and looked up. I had found my way to one of the local schools, and I was standing under a big soccer goalpost, football soccer goalpost. And I thought back to this lesson about 42 journeys, and I realized I have reached the goals of our journey, our 6-year stay in Long Beach, California. It's time to move on. And I could see the next goal ahead of me. And I went ahead and started walking towards that goal. And it was late at night, Saturday night, and the fields were not really well lit. But as I approached the next goal, I realized this is a huge field, and there's one goal post after another going on and on and on. And it made me realize and laugh a little bit of, okay, I am heading towards my next goal, but don't think that's the end. We moved to Sydney, Australia. We moved to Tampa, Florida. We moved to Worcester, Massachusetts. We moved to Chicago. We moved to 3 different locations in Chicago. We moved to New Jersey. We moved to Tampa again. Now I'm in Baltimore. And I'm thinking, what was that number? 42? Oh, God.
You've barely just begun.
I'm beginning to think I'm a bit old for this, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things is beginning to realize that wherever it is in life, when and where, that's up to God. What we do with it, that's our. So the next story that he shares here is the Chabad rabbi who was hospitalized himself. And when his son was going by the Rebbe told him, tell your father that when he finishes the mission for which he was sent to the hospital, God will send him home. And so the rabbi realized, okay, I thought I was just a patient in the hospital, but your job as a rabbi is never done. So he started talking to the other patients in the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, the staff. He got himself back into chaplain or rabbi mode and started talking to people. And the next thing he knew, he was discharged. The family, decades later, the family met a doctor who shared with them his journey began when their father was a patient of his and started talking about God and spirit and responsibilities, etc. And that began his life journey, his spiritual life journey, because of the patient that was in the room with him, right? So every situation, it's, you know, he didn't go to the hospital just to have a hospital procedure or something. He went to the hospital because he had a divine mission to fulfill, and he has to do that. You know, with that in mind, every time we've gone to the hospital for a kid's thing or my things, or when I went for stent put in, I bring a charity box, I bring coins. I ask everyone that's involved in the surgery to put in some coins in the pushka. I do whatever I can to be the chaplain on the scene. Until they put me under, okay, and then I have to shut up.
You don't know
But
that.
I tried even then.
Wait, you don't know that you were quiet when you were under.
That's true. That's
Not
true.
everybody
I
is.
preach it straight through. Oh. So one of the interesting things that Rebbe brings out is, again, we're talking about time and place, right? So some of the 42 masos, journeys, that we had in the desert, some of those times we stayed for years in one location. But there were sometimes we were only there for one day, which meant we came there, we spread out, we put up the entire tabernacle. I mean, that's a temple in the desert, right? I mean, that's an awful lot of work, putting up all the tents and putting up all the pillars, and a tremendous amount of work, and then take it all down the next day and travel on. And the Rebbe was bringing out that sometimes where and when we are, it's not a long period. It may be a chance situation where you're in the airport and you run into somebody, you have an opportunity to help them put on tefillin or learn about Shabbos candles or share a few words of Torah. You know, the Rebbe has told us in one of his aphorisms that if two Jews meet, it should be for the benefit of a third. So how many times do we end up connecting with someone in the grocery store or at the airport or someplace, and we get into a conversation and we have an opportunity to help somebody else come from that conversation? That is part of the purpose. Nothing is by happenstance. Nothing is just a circumstantial evidence thing. But truth is that everything and every time we have opportunities. Now, I was sharing that with someone, a veteran I was counseling earlier today, and he shared with me a circumstance where he has recently recovered from a mountain biking accident. And he finally got clearance from his doctor to get back out there. And the very next trip he's out there, his front brakes lock and he goes right over the front steering wheel and has another accident. He recuperates in a couple of days, but he's asking me, he says, Rabbi, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Fix your brakes.
That's what I told him.
Biking is not for you.
Wrap yourself.
I did not say biking is not for you. I told him, I said, check your brakes. Yeah, so yes, we have to be cognizant of what's the divine providence. Why are we here now? What is the opportunity in front of us? But we can't get so nutsy about it that we also take out the simple understanding of the situation. Fix the brakes.
Of course, if he would have said biking is not for you, maybe he would have gotten a scooter and gone further.
and
But
fell
for this
harder.
particular person, biking is for him. It's you know, again, that's why it's so important that when we have a challenge or something, we have someone else to talk to who kind of knows us, right? The Rebbe said, if you get a doctor's opinion and you're not comfortable, get a second opinion, right?
And
Get
a
a
third.
second opinion. But if the two opinions are diametrically opposed to each other, now what do? You
Third.
don't go for a third doctor's opinion. You speak to Yedidin Umevinin, meaning you speak to someone who's a friend of yours who knows that industry. In other words, I might call Ron about a cardiac surgery thing. He's not a cardiologist, right? But he's a friend. He cares about me, and he knows enough about the industry that I could take his advice and know that I'm safe with that. But the distinction is that he's a friend of mine who cares about me, and he knows that industry. He's not an expert cardiologist. He knows enough to listen to two cardiac opinions and be able to advise me out of love. Right? And so that's why we always go to that third Yedidin Umavinin, someone who's close to you who knows the industry. Right? So that's a part of that one. But again, the primary topic we wanted to review tonight is everything is by divine providence. Where and when is run by God. It's totally controlled by God. What we do with that is up to us. And when we seem to run into obstacles or challenges or roadblocks or, you know, all of those type of things, turbulence, transition, and transience, we have to stop and think about, what am I supposed to be learning or doing in this time and place? Is there some type of mitzvah or outreach or chesed kindness that I'm supposed to be doing here? Is there some lesson I'm supposed to be learning here? What is it that I'm supposed to glean and be able to move on from there? I want to open up for any thoughts that you have from the specific class, and then we'll bring afterwards. Thoughts you take away. All right, Selena.
Never
You're
thought
up.
about why I get stuck in a certain place. Interesting. Yeah, sometimes life, you're forced to deviate from the norm,
Mhm.
and you
And
don't
there's purpose in
give it
it.
much thought.
And we should
Okay.
always be thoughtful.
I have something.
Yes.
I have a little 7-year-old boy that just started on my route. And for a couple of weeks, he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't speak to me. One morning, he said, "Good morning and thank you." All of a sudden, the other day I gave him some candy for Halloween. I said to him when he crossed the street, I said, "I have something for you. Wait on the corner." And he was so excited. Now he listens to everything that I ask him to do. He pays attention. So I don't know what his home life is like, if he gets the attention like that, but I think he's really enjoying it.
Yeah. And you've made a change in his life in a very positive way.
And now he rides his bicycle and he gets to where he's going a lot quicker. So I get home on time.
Tell him to check his brakes.
And his brakes are good. I just have to get him to come off and walk his bicycle across the street.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty of this is, again, we don't know that the extent of our little act of kindness, where this could go. But it
Exactly.
seems to me that in such a scenario, having one person in his life that cares and that he can trust can shift his perspective on the world. So acts of goodness and kindness on our part,
Yep.
we have no idea how powerful they can be.
Is that the mission? Part of what I'm taking away is that, first of all, hindsight is 20/20.
Mhm.
And you mentioned 1967. In 1967, as a fairly new and very paranoid immigrant to this country, because I was rooming with a bunch of dopers and what have you in Boston. And so I was, by a friend of theirs, invited to participate in Expo 67. We probably arranged the biggest airlift since Berlin from Boston to Montreal for Expo 67. And two things happened there. First of all, I learned a lot about human nature, which, quite frankly, I wish I hadn't learned. But at one point, very early in these trips, we were not remunerated except being put up in a nice hotel and had to run of the expo. But in one of the trips, I'm called by the public announcement system at the airport in Montreal by name and asked to come to a certain point. And I said, "No, what the hell did I do? What are they going to arrest me for and deport me for?" Well, it turned out there was this little couple that had trouble being understood. They were on their way to Detroit, and nobody could understand them because the only thing they spoke was Russian and German. And so my compatriots ratted me out, and therefore I was hailed to come and help them, which I did, and they were very happy. So, but like I said, we don't believe in coincidence, my wife and I. Much too much has happened in our lives that would definitely speak against that. But that came to mind when, first of all, you mentioned 1967. And then, well, yeah, we all have to be somewhere for something. I do believe that.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
at the 4 kids we adopted, that makes sense that we were exiled from God's country in New Hampshire and sent to this God forbidden state in Illinois because there were 4 kids that needed us.
There you go. There you go. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that one.